The last light of evening stretched long across the fields, the kind of fading gold that makes everything look softer than it is. Margaret Kane stood on her porch, tea in hand, watching her daughter's German shepherd nose through the garden. She thought he was after a mole, or maybe one of the rabbits that plague her roses. But then the dog's paws hit something solid, something that made a sound too hollow, too final. By the time Margaret set down her cup and walked toward him, dirt was flying, the dog's growl low and urgent. She saw what he uncovered, and her blood turned cold. If you enjoy slow-burn thrillers full of secrets, betrayal, and small-town darkness, you may want to follow along for more stories like this. The garden had always been Margaret's sanctuary. Rows of lavender pressed against white fences. Roses arched along a trellis her late husband had built. In the evenings, when the air cooled and the scent of cut grass drifted from the neighboring fields, she felt closest to peace. But tonight, standing a few feet from her daughter's K9, peace was the farthest thing from her mind. "Rex!" she called, forcing a sharpness into her voice. The shepherd ignored her, claws working furiously, tail stiff as a rod. Dirt flung backward in dark sprays, scattering across Margaret's shoes. She bent, reaching to tug him away, but then she froze. The shape emerging beneath his paws wasn't stone. It wasn't a root. It was a box, metal, pitted with rust, the lid dented in at the center. A soldier's footlocker, or something like it. Margaret's mouth went dry. Her first thought was of her daughter, Claire. She brought Rex with her when she moved back from the city, a fully trained police K9, retired after leg injury, his eyes too sharp for comfort. Claire was inside now, putting away groceries, humming off key. Margaret didn't want her to see this. "Leave it," Margaret whispered, her voice barely carrying. She shoved the dog back with more force than she meant, and Rex yielded, panting, his muzzle smeared with soil. The box sat there, half exposed, a century-old secret trembling in the cool twilight. Margaret's hand hovered over the corroded lid. She didn't want to touch it, didn't want to be part of whatever waited inside. But she did. The hinges shrieked as she pried it open. The smell hit first, damp earth, metal, something sour beneath it. Then came the sight. Bundles of newspaper, yellowed and damp. Beneath them, plastic bags, knotted tight, each holding something darker. She thought it was leather at first. Then her stomach twisted. Flesh. Margaret staggered back, choking on bile. Rex barked once, sharp and insistent. Inside the house, Claire's humming stopped. "Mom." Claire's voice floated through the screen door. "Everything okay out there?" Margaret's lips trembled. She glanced at the box, at the nightmare clawed out her roses, and in that instant, a terrible instinct seized her. Don't let her see. Don't let her know. "Yes," Margaret called back, forcing her voice steady. "Everything's fine. Just the dog digging again." She shoved the lid down, her fingers trembling so violently she almost dropped it. The clatter seemed louder than a gunshot. Rex growled low in his throat, staring at the box as if it had a pulse. Margaret pressed dirt over it with her shoes until her feet were black, her breath shallow. Then she turned to the dog, gripping his collar. "Not a sound," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't understand. Or maybe he did. His amber eyes never left hers. Claire stepped onto the porch a moment later, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was 30, hair pulled back, shadows under her eyes. The kind of woman who had seen too much city crime and carried it like a second skin. "You look pale," Claire said, frowning. "You okay?" Margaret forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just tired. But even as she said it, she knew whatever was buried in her garden hadn't been put there by accident. Someone had wanted it hidden, and now it was awake again. The sheriff. Sheriff Tom Harker hadn't set foot on Margaret's property in years. He'd known her late husband back, when they all went to the same church, back before the Kane family drifted into grief and silence. When his patrol car rolled down the gravel lane, the next morning, Margaret's pulse spiked. She hadn't called him. She hadn't told anyone. But Claire had. "I found something," her daughter said, standing stiff in the morning sun, Rex at her side. The dog had dug at the spot again, clawing the soil bare while Margaret slept. Claire must have followed him. Now the box sat on the porch, the lid open, evidence glistening in plastic bags. Tom Harker stared down at it with a face carved from stone. Then he looked at Margaret. "You didn't call this in last night?" he asked. His voice was even, but the accusation was clear. Margaret flushed. "I didn't know what I was looking at." "Flesh," Tom said flatly. "You were looking at human remains." Claire shot her mother a sharp look, the kind that carried years of unspoken tension. "You knew it was something. You hid it." Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it again. Tom sighed, running a hand over his jaw. "We'll get the state boys out here. Forensics." But he hesitated. "This feels familiar." "What do you mean?" Claire asked. Tom's eyes narrowed. "We had a case. Long time ago. Disappearance nobody could explain. Never solved. I was just a deputy then. A girl, 17. Name was Lila Dobbs." The name struck Margaret like a slap. She knew it. Everyone in town did. The girl who vanished after prom. Her dress found snagged on a fence post. Her shoes left by the riverbank. They'd searched for weeks. Dogs, helicopters, the works. Nothing. Until now. Tom looked at Margaret again, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Funny thing is, the Dobbs place is less than a mile through those woods." Margaret's throat closed. Secrets in the air. That evening. The property swarmed with strangers, state investigators, forensic techs, deputies stringing tape across her roses. Flashbulbs popped as they photographed the box. Rex barked until Claire leashed him. Margaret stood on the porch, arms crossed against the chill, watching her sanctuary torn apart. The lavender trampled, soil overturned, voices calling measurements and codes. Claire lingered close to the sheriff, her voice low but firm. She belonged here, among them. Margaret did not. At dusk, when the others packed up and left with their evidence, Tom lingered. His boots crunched gravel as he climbed the porch steps. "You should know something," he said. Margaret's heart thudded. "What?" "The Dobbs family, they always thought she ran. Trouble at home. Strict father. Boyfriend nobody liked." But he paused, studying Margaret with eyes that had seen too much. "They searched everywhere but here. Never thought to dig in your garden." Margaret forced a scoff. "Because why would they?" Tom didn't smile. "That's the question, isn't it?" Behind him, Claire emerged, her face tight. "Mom," she said, "is there something you're not telling us?" Margaret felt the world tilt, her breath catching on the edge of truth and denial. She had secrets. Everyone did. But this one could tear everything apart. Rex whined, ears pinned back, his gaze fixed on Margaret as if he knew, as if he'd always known. The storm rolled in after midnight. Margaret lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the windows rattle in their frames, the wind sweeping across the fields. Every crack of thunder carried her back to the garden, to the sight of that rusted box yawning open under the porch light. Beside the memory came another. Lila Dobbs, 17, all freckles and dark curls, her laughter spilling across a church picnic years ago. Margaret remembered the girl twirling in her prom dress for the local paper, proud father at her side. A week later, she was gone. The storm pressed against the house like an accusation. She turned onto her side, staring at the shadows on the wall. Claire's room down the hall was silent. But Margaret doubted her daughter slept. Claire had always been restless when something gnawed at her, the same way her father used to pace the floor in the dead of night. A sharp bark cut through the thunder. "Rex!" Margaret sat up, heart pounding. She found him in the kitchen, claws tapping the linoleum as he pawed at the back door. His ears pricked, nose pressed to glass. "What now?" Margaret whispered, crouching to hold his collar. But then she saw what he was staring at. In the garden, beyond the trampled roses and the yellow tape, a figure moved. A flashlight beam swept low across the soil. Someone was out there, searching. Margaret's breath caught. The storm swallowed the sound of the door as she cracked it open, slipping onto the porch. Rain soaked her hair, plastered her nightgown to her skin. "Who's there?" she called. The beam snapped off. Silence. For a moment, only the storm answered. Then came the crunch of footsteps retreating into the woods. She didn't chase. She couldn't. Her knees had given out long ago. She stood there trembling, Rex growling at her side, the garden a mess of shadows and broken earth. Someone had come to reclaim what the dog had unearthed. Someone who had been waiting all these years. Morning confessions. Claire found her on the porch at dawn, hair damp, eyes hollow. "Mom, you're soaked. Did you even sleep?" Margaret shook her head, unable to look at her daughter. "Someone was here last night. In the garden." Claire stiffened. "You're sure?" "I saw the light. Heard the steps." Claire rubbed her forehead. "Damn it. I should have stayed up. We should have had someone posted." She glanced at Rex, who sat alert at Margaret's feet, ears twitching. "He knows. Don't you, boy?" The dog's tail thumped once against the boards. Claire crouched in front of her mother, her voice lowering. "Listen, you need to tell me the truth now. Did Dad have something to do with this?" Margaret's head snapped up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying a girl disappeared a mile from here, and now a body shows up in our garden. Dad worked nights back then. He drove out that way all the time." Margaret's throat tightened. "He was a good man." "That's not what I asked." The accusation burned. Margaret stood, crossing her arms against the chill. "Your father wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a killer. Don't you dare suggest it." Claire's jaw clenched. "If you know something, Mom, keeping it quiet isn't protecting him. It's destroying us." Margaret turned away, blinking back tears. She remembered those nights too well. Her husband stumbling in late, smelling of whiskey and rain, eyes shadowed. She had asked him once if he'd been faithful, and his silence had been an answer she never forgot. But murder? She couldn't believe it. She wouldn't. Sheriff's visit. By mid-morning, Sheriff Tom Harker was back. He carried the weight of authority in his heavy boots, his hat dripping rainwater on Margaret's porch. "Had a report of trespassing last night," he said. "You see anything?" Margaret hesitated. Claire spoke for her. "Someone was in the garden. My mom saw the light." Tom's eyes flicked between them, unreadable. "Could have been kids." Word spreads fast when bones turn up. Margaret shook her head. That wasn't a child. Whoever was moved with purpose. They knew exactly where to look. Tom studied her, his silence pressing like a hand on her throat. "If you're holding back—" "I'm not," she snapped. His gaze softened slightly, but not enough. "The Dobbs family is asking questions. Folks are stirring. Some already think the Canes had something to hide." Margaret's hands trembled on the porch rail. "We didn't." Tom's voice dropped. "Then tell me, Margaret, 30 years ago, where was your husband the night Lila Dobbs disappeared?" The question gutted her. She had no answer that could be trusted. "I don't remember," she whispered. But she did. She remembered him stumbling in after dawn, mud on his boots. She had buried that memory so deep she'd nearly forgotten. Tom sighed. "Forensics will tell us soon enough. Until then, stay close. And if Rex finds anything else, don't keep it quiet this time." As he left, Margaret felt her daughter's eyes boring into her. Claire's silence was worse than any words. Unearthed. That night, Rex refused to settle. He paced the kitchen, whining at the door until Margaret let him out. Claire followed, flashlight in hand. The dog led them past the roses, past the taped-off box, deeper into the garden. His nose pressed to the soil again, claws tearing at the earth with frantic urgency. Margaret's stomach lurched. Not again. But yes, again. This time, the soil gave way to something smaller, wrapped in fabric. So decayed it dissolved at Claire's touch. Inside lay a necklace, tarnished but unmistakable. Claire held it up, rain dripping from her hair. "I've seen this in the old files. Lila Dobbs wore this the night she vanished." Margaret's knees buckled. Her daughter's voice was steel. "Mom, tell me the truth. Did Dad bring this here?" Margaret shook her head violently. No, he couldn't have." "Then who did?" The storm gathered again overhead, thunder rolling across the fields. Margaret's voice cracked. "I don't know." But a part of her feared she did. A part of her remembered late nights, Whispers in the kitchen. Tom Harker's visits long after her husband had gone to bed. And suddenly, the sheriff's face, watchful, unreadable, looked different in her mind. Claire's doubt. Back inside, Claire sat at the table, the necklace between them. Rex curled at her feet. "I went into this job because I believed in justice," she said quietly. "But if Dad had anything to do with this, if you knew—" Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Mom, I can't live with lies anymore." Margaret reached across the table. But Claire pulled back. "I didn't know," Margaret whispered. "I swear it." But Claire's silence carved the room in two. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, as if he sensed a fracture. Betrayal. The following evening, Margaret discovered the betrayal. She'd left her knitting basket beside her chair, only to find a tape recorder hidden beneath the yarn. The red light blinked, capturing every word, every silence of the last 2 days. She froze, realization slicing through her. Claire had planted it. Her own daughter had been recording her. Margaret's throat closed. When Claire returned from town, uniform still damp from the rain, Margaret confronted her. "How could you?" Claire's eyes flicked to the recorder in Margaret's hand. She didn't deny it. "I had to know if you were telling me everything. If Dad—" "Your father is dead," Margaret snapped, the fury in her voice startling them both. "And you're dragging him through the mud with strangers listening. How dare you?" Claire's voice broke. "Because I don't know who to trust anymore. Not even you." The words pierced deeper than any knife. Margaret turned away, clutching the recorder like a wound. The house seemed smaller, darker, the storm outside hammering the windows like fists. For the first time in years, she wished her husband were alive. Not because she trusted him, but because she needed someone else to carry the blame. The knock. Near midnight. As lightning split the sky, a knock rattled the front door. Margaret froze in her chair. Claire rose cautiously, hand hovering near the pistol on her belt. When she opened the door, Sheriff Tom Harker stood there, hat dripping, eyes shadowed. "I need to speak with your mother," he said. Claire frowned. "About what?" Tom's gaze slid past her, to Margaret. "About what we both should have said years ago." The storm roared outside, and Margaret's heart plummeted. She knew then. He knew. And the truth, the one she had buried with the roses, was about to claw its way into the light. The storm had finally broken into a steady downpour, water streaming off the gutters in silver sheets. Sheriff Tom Harker stood on the porch, rain dripping from his hat brim, his face carved with something Margaret couldn't read, guilt or fear or both. Claire's hand lingered near her pistol, her stance rigid. "Whatever you need to say to my mother, you can say it in front of me." Tom shook his head once, slow. "No, this is between me and her." Margaret's stomach turned. She had spent 3 decades keeping her silence. She had thought that silence would be buried with her husband. But here Tom stood, soaked to the bone, ready to exhume it. "It's fine, Claire," Margaret whispered, her voice cracking. "Go upstairs." Her daughter's eyes burned into her. "You sure?" "Yes." Claire hesitated, then disappeared up the stairs, Rex padding behind her. The dog's nails clicked against the wood, then faded into silence. Only then did Margaret step closer to Tom, her breath shallow. "Why now?" His eyes darkened. "Because they're going to find it all, Margaret. The necklace, the box, the bones. And when they do, your husband's name will be the one they drag through the mud." Margaret's heart lurched. "And what about yours?" His jaw tightened. Rain hissed around them, the porch creaking beneath his weight. "I thought I could live with it. Hell, I told myself she was just another runaway. But when I saw that necklace in your girl's hands," he swallowed, "I knew I couldn't outrun it anymore." Margaret's fingers dug into the porch rail. "Say it, Tom." His voice dropped to a rasp. "It was me, not your husband. Me." The world tilted. The storm seemed to hush for a heartbeat, the air thick with the confession, the night of the disappearance. He told it like a man spilling poison from his veins. 30 years ago, prom night. He'd been a deputy then, young, cocky, carrying the badge like a crown. He'd driven by the Dobbs place on patrol, and found Lila out by the road, Mascara Street, her father's voice still ringing in her ears. She was crying, he whispered, begging for someone to take her away. And his breath shuddered. I should have called it in. Should have driven her straight home. But she looked at me like I was the only one who saw her, and I made a choice. Margaret's stomach heaved. You took her here. He nodded, shame flooding his eyes. We ended up in the field, under the trees. She wanted out of that town, out of that house. She kissed me. And then, when she realized I wasn't going to take her to the bus station like I promised, she fought. Margaret's hand shook so badly, she had to clutch the rail. You killed her. It wasn't supposed to happen, Tom said, voice breaking. She tripped, hit her head on a rock. She was bleeding, not moving, and I panicked. I thought, if they found me with her, he squeezed his eyes shut. So I buried her here, in your garden. I thought no one would ever know. Margaret staggered back. The storm roared again, drowning her gasp. You let my husband live under suspicion all these years, she hissed. Tom's face hardened. Your husband drank himself to death. He never asked questions. Maybe part of him knew. Margaret's hand trembled toward him. You used me. You sat in my kitchen all those years after, eating supper with us, praying in church with us, while her body was out there under my roses. Tom's voice was hollow. I told myself I was protecting you, that if anyone ever dug her up, the blame would fall on your husband, not you. It was cowardice, Margaret. Nothing else. Claire returns. The creak of the stair made them both spin. Claire stood at the landing, her pistol drawn, Rex stiff at her side. Her face was a mass of fury and disbelief. I heard everything, she said. Her voice was cold steel. Tom's shoulders sagged. Claire, don't you dare say my name. She descended slowly, weapon steady, Rex's growl vibrating through the hall. You let this whole town suffer. You let a family grieve without answers. You let my father... Her voice cracked, but she steadied it. You're no sheriff. You're a murderer. Tom raised his hands, rain dripping from his sleeves. I was young. I made a mistake. A mistake is a missed turn, not a grave in my mother's garden. Rex barked, sharp and commanding, as if the air itself trembled with rage. For a moment, Margaret thought Claire would pull the trigger. Her daughter's eyes burned, her finger trembling against the steel. But then she lowered the gun with a violent shake of her head. No, you don't get an easy out. You're going to live with this, Tom. You're going to rot in a cell. She called it in. Deputies arrived within the hour. They cuffed Tom Harker on Margaret's porch, his hat gone, his hair plastered to his skull. He didn't resist. As they dragged him to the cruiser, he looked back once at Margaret, his eyes hollow. She turned away. Aftermath. The days blurred. Reporters swarmed the lane. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors. The Dobbs family wept on television as they held the tarnished necklace. Claire stayed busy, filing reports, giving statements, drowning herself in procedure. She didn't look at her mother much. Margaret moved through it like a ghost. The garden was gone, torn up by shovels and boots, the lavender trampled to mud. She stopped drinking tea on the porch, stopped sleeping in her bed. The house felt poisoned. One evening, she found Claire in the kitchen, staring at Rex as he dozed on the rug. Are you angry with me? Margaret asked quietly. Claire didn't look up. I don't know. Part of me blames you for staying quiet all these years. Another part, she shook her head. You loved Dad. You didn't want to see him as a monster. I get that. Margaret's throat closed. I wanted to believe we were safe, that what was buried would stay buried. Claire's eyes finally met hers. But the truth never stays underground, Mom. Not forever. Margaret nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. She reached for her daughter's hand, and this time Claire didn't pull away. Quiet resolution. The town would remember Tom Harker not as a sheriff, but as a killer. They would remember the girl he buried and the years of silence that followed. But Margaret would remember the garden, the roses her husband planted, the nights she stood barefoot in the soil, believing beauty could cover anything. Weeks later, When the investigators left and the tape came down, Margaret walked to the ruined plot with a spade. Rex padded beside her, watching as she dug small, careful holes. She planted lavender again, row by row, her hands raw, her breath steady. When Claire came out to stand with her, the air was cool, the earth damp with memory. Margaret pressed her palm against the soil, whispering to no one and to everyone, "Rest now." The storm clouds had passed, leaving only silence. And in that silence, for the first time in decades, Margaret felt something close to peace.